Patrol, ladies and gentlemen. Doom Patrol is back. Oh man, season 4, episode 1, Doom Patrol. They should have called it Doomed Patrol. That would have been awesome. But it's your boy Icon with some DC TV. And I swear, when the episode started and the Doom Patrol jingle played, like, you honestly don't know, like, how bad I missed that. I missed that. Like, Doom Patrol has one of the best opening theme songs in, like, superhero history. But anyway, so we're kicking things off where, you know, in the last season, they were the Doom Force and they were on their way to thwart crime because now they decided to become a crime fighting unit. So they're no longer the Doom Force. I guess that name didn't stick. They are, in fact, the Doom Patrol. Rita Farr is in charge of the Doom Patrol as their leader, and she's given the team code names and sends them out to thwart crime all over Clovington. So, and you know, they get their traditional names, you know, from the comic book, whereas like Cliff is Robot Man, Jane is Crazy Jane, Cyborg is still, it's weird, like Cyborg's still Cyborg and he doesn't have the cybernetics, and then Negative Man for Larry, and then she calls Madame Rouge, who's still on the team, she calls Madame Rouge shitface McGillicuddy or something like that. Like, basically Rita's still mad. Like, Rita still got beef with Madame Rouge. Like, she still hates her guts. Madame Rouge is on the team still trying to make amends so she can hopefully, you know, like, earn Rita's trust back, you know, for her destroying the sisterhood of da-da-da-da-da. But in the very beginning of the episode, it takes us to the future, 20 years in the future, where we actually see a 40-something-year-old Victor Stone, and he's walking around like a town that's been completely desecrated and destroyed and devastated, whatever. And he has a Geiger counter, and he's searching for something. While he's searching for whatever it is he's searching for, all of a sudden there's like a rumbling under the ground, and then all of a sudden, like I don't know, I guess like the way the scene was set up, they made us think that it was the time machine that busted through the floor, or it was the time machine that's what he was looking for all along. So it's very strange, like, how that happened. But then, like, you know, back to the present, it shows the Doom Patrol. They're out there, like I said, they're fighting crime. And Cliff, because remember in the last season, Cliff was in the giant robot. They said that they used the brain's brain. They put the brain into the robot. I forgot what happened to the brain. I know, matter of fact, I think they crushed him. They stepped on him and they crushed him. But I think like they're just putting his brain into the brain just so the brain of the robot just has a function, like some sort of brain to power it. But I don't think the brain himself is actually in control, because the Doom Patrol themselves, they're the ones that control the robot. So anyway, but they use the robot so they can, you know, like go like minutes into the future so they can stop crime before it happens. Everybody's going through their own individual thing. Like I said, Cliff, they said that Victor and his dad, they tried to put his body back together as best they could, but he's still missing an arm, and they're trying to get parts for the arm so they can make Cliff whole again. But, you know, I said, but he's got his body back, and he's not happy about that. You know, like, he wanted to be back in the giant robot. Rita, like I said, she's doing the leader thing, but while she's being the leader, nobody listens to her because, you know, they don't respect her as a leader, and she's constantly like talking shit to Madame Rouge, who's just legitimately trying to help, and it's like this whole big shit show. There was even a moment where they were fighting this villain. I forgot the villain's name, but he had like a penis gun, and like one of his henchmen, like his IT henchman, had like an ass gun. So this is a weird shit. And then like when there was a moment where like Rita like grabbed his gun to keep her from shooting people, and it's like he was grabbing his penis, and it was like really funny. And then while the guy was like shooting off at the Doom Patrol, like Rita told Madame Rouge, she was like, "Oh, draw his fire." And then Madame Rouge was like, "Bitch," she's like, "I'm not going out there." And then, but they also said that Rita solved the problem of how you lose your memories when you travel through time. Because remember, in last season, every time somebody went in the time machine, they lost their memory. Apparently, putting a jellyfish on your head prevents you from losing your memories, and it was never explained how or why that happened. That's just what happened, and we're just gonna run with it. Madame Rouge is actually the only person who refuses to put the jellyfish on her head because she doesn't want to be reminded of like her betrayal, but eventually her memories do come back. And of course, with each individual person that we see like now and present, there's also like some drama that comes with it as well. For Rita, good thing, she's trying to be the leader. Bad thing, she's still holding on to the Madame Rouge anger, and the team doesn't respect her. Victor, you know, he took the cybernetics out of his body so he can be, you know, he can be normal again. and he was set off to try to like live a normal life. Unfortunately, it put him in a position where he's still on the Doom Patrol, but now he's not in the action. He's just the IT guy. He just does like the tech stuff, and he's the Felicity Smoke of the Doom Patrol, and he's not really happy about that as well. And plus, despite the fact that he actually has his regular looking self again, he still doesn't reach out to the outside world and and mingle with people that he once knew. Cliff, and I said he's got his body back to an extent, but he's just basically just like he's just Cliff. He's just doing like regular Cliff shit, and his biggest thing is like he's just upset that he can't be in the big giant robot anymore. Larry made peace with with the new negative spirit. The two of them have bonded, but the problem with that is, although he's bonded with the negative spirit and he's trying to make it all about the negative spirit so the two of them can like truly be one, Larry still misses the outside world and interacting with human beings, and he misses like that human connection, but he's trying to lie to himself to make him say like like he's perfectly happy with him and the negative spirit. Jane, now remember like Dr. H, like in Harrison, like in the last season, she took over as primary from Jane, and she actually had Jane going to counseling. The doctor, she's actually been with the Doom Patrol this entire time, like going on missions with them, but because she's a doctor and she likes to psychoanalyze people, she basically did an evaluation on the entire team and like because she was the one narrating everybody's like flaws and where we saw them last from the last season up until this season, like where their positives or where their negatives were. So she's become like the primary, but she's also on the team as well. And then she tries to put like her doctoral skills to good use, because she ends up like talking down criminals and getting into their psyche and making them surrender before they even knew what happened. But then there is a moment where she did go back to the underground because she's still a part of the underground, so she does have to go down there from time to time. She saw actual Jane, like Jane was down there. Her and Jane had a conversation, and then she flat out asked Jane, she was like, why are you hiding down here in the underground? Because she said that the girl is missing, like we can't find Kay. All the other girls are looking for Kay, and you're the only one that's just sitting here on your ass, just hiding in a cabin. And then Jane was like, yeah, because she said that this is the girl's memory, like this is her brain. If the girl doesn't want to be found, she's not going to be found. So she said, I'm just going to sit here and sit on my ass. So you want to be primary, take your ass back upstairs and be primary. But then that's when Dr. H was just like, oh, you're just hiding Jane from the outside world. She's like, you think this is a vacation, but the girl will be found, and blah, blah, blah. Then she goes back upstairs. So that's where everybody's been, since the last season up until this season. So now Dr. Stone and Victor, they ended up getting the parts necessary for Cliff's hand. They fixed the hand, they bring it to Cliff, they had everybody come downstairs, and that was a funny moment because when Cliff came downstairs and he saw that they actually had his new robot hand for him, he was just like, oh my god, is that my hand? This is great, this is awesome. And then he looks around and he's like, why the fuck is everybody else here? But then they wanted to celebrate the moment as a team, because not only did they fix his hand, they ended up using nanite technology, and they made it so where he can actually have feeling in one finger. And they said that if that goes perfectly fine, then the nanites will spread throughout the rest of the hand, and he could regain, feeling in his entire hand. So then Cliff got all excited. Everybody got excited about it. While everybody was like happy and cheering for Cliff, Rita was still making faces at Madame Rouge. Then Madame Rouge felt some kind of way. And then Cliff decided, he was like, hey, let's take the time machine and go to Florida, because he said that now that he has feeling in one finger, the first thing he wants to do is touch his grandson. So then everybody agrees to go. But then Madame Rouge was just like, oh dear. She was like, can I have a chat with you in the private for a second? And then she said to her, she was just like, Rita, she's like, I've eaten a lot of shit like over the last month or so. And she was like, I was hoping that, all the shit that I've been taking from you, I would one day earn your trust. But it seems like that's not going to happen. So she said, I think that when I come back, I'm just going to move out. And then that's when Rita was just like, I bitch. She was like, don't let the door hit you with a good Lord split you. And then like, man, and it's sad because Madame Rouge was the bad guy. Like, she was the villain. She had no remorse. She was angry, like she betrayed everybody that she knew, and she destroyed the Sisterhood of Dada. So Rita's anger and Rita's, like holding on to this, like Rita's held anger is 100% totally justified. The problem is watching Rita treat Madame Rouge like shit. They're making me feel bad for Madame Rouge. And I'm at a point now where like I'm legitimately rooting for Madame Rouge to like be the hero, because I don't like how Rita's treated her with it. And it's crazy because Madame Rouge is the bad guy. So, but then like she said she was gonna move out, and then Rita was like, all right, peace. So she was like, after they come from Florida, that's when she's gonna do it. They all jump in the time machine, and then while they're in the time machine, Madame Rouge was just like, oh, I'm not gonna take the jellyfish. And then Rita was just like, if you don't put this jellyfish on your peanut head, she said, I want you to remember your promise to move out of my house. So then she puts the jellyfish on. While she got the jellyfish on, everybody got the jellyfish on. They're about to go into the 4 minutes into the future in Florida. while they're traveling through the time stream, there's a girl who happens to be in the time stream and she's floating around and she crashed into their time machine. Madame Rouge immediately recognized her because she was like, oh, she was like, when I first came to Cleverton, she was like, that girl was watching me take a, no, what did she say? She was like, that girl was watching me take a whiz. and then she's like, I accidentally threw her into the time stream. And see, I didn't realize that was the time stream at the time. I thought she killed that chick. And the girl's basically been floating around the time stream for the last, like, for the whole season. But then, like, they didn't pull her into the ship, which I thought was crazy. I'm like, why would you not save this girl? But then, you know, like, after she flew away, then something happened to the time machine where they got knocked off course. I don't know if her bumping into the time machine got them knocked off course or if something else happened. But then they ended up, like, 20 years into the future. When they got to the future, Cliff was just like, okay, we're in the future. Let's just get back in the time machine and go to Florida. But then Cyborg was like, no, because you got to give it a chance. He said that the time machine is, like, overheated, so we got to give it some time to cool down before we can use it again. And I'm starting to feel like this is very like specifically calculated, like how this whole thing is planning. So then they come out, you know, they realize where they are. They're in Cloverton 20 years from now, but the whole town looks like complete shit. They go to the mansion. When they go to the mansion, they end up falling for a mousetrap, and they got trapped in a mousetrap. And when they got trapped, that's when 40-year-old Cyborg showed up, and then he was just like, oh my God, it's you people. So he brings them in. The whole team asked him, they were just like, oh, what happened? What happened to the world? Like, why does the whole town look like complete hell? And then he said about 20 years ago, we were invaded by the alien butts, you know, and then they're just like, oh, I thought we killed all the alien butts. And he was like, no, he said that one of them escaped, and the one that escaped was actually infected with zombieism, and it started like a zombie butt apocalypse. And the funny thing is, I actually remember that. I remember the episode where they were in the barn and they killed all the butts, and then there was that one butt that did get away, and I believe that butt was a zombie. So that actually is like, it's not something that they just made up for the sake of having a season. That legitimately happened on one of last season's episodes. So it was a nice callback that they even remembered that to even do that. But then he was, you know, he said that the whole town got taken over, the world got taken over by the zombie butt apocalypse, and it started here in Cloverton. The team immediately wanted to know why Victor was the only one there, and then he was just like, well, the rest of y'all are upstairs. You can go upstairs and talk to yourselves if you want to. He was like, all y'all do is stay in your room anyway. So then, so then after that, he pulled Madame Rouge to the side and he was just like, yo, you're actually not upstairs. And then she was like, I actually died, didn't I? And then he was like, no, he said, actually, you left right before the zombie apocalypse, but apocalypse happened, and we don't know what happened to you. He was like, you just fell off the face of the planet. So then he was like, yo, Vic, let me holler at you for a second, bro. So him and Victor went somewhere, and then Madame Rouge was basically just walking around trying to figure out her life. So basically what happened was the whole team died. Like the whole team, they were killed, they were murdered by the zombies, and their ghosts, remain, and their ghosts live in the mansion. Victor was the only person who survived. Rita went to go talk to Ghost Rita, and then she was just like, she was like, let me guess. She was like, I had a plan, and then they didn't follow the plan, and then we all died. And then she was like, no. Rita was just like, Ghost Rita was like, she was like, we're actually just not good at leadership. She was like, it's not what we do, and our lack of leadership doomed us all. And then now she has to wrestle with that one, and she was like, well, tell me everything that happened. Cliff ended up talking to himself, and Ghost Cliff refused to tell Big Cliff what happened to his family, what happened to him, and he refused to tell him how he died. Larry went to his room. He couldn't find himself. He found his ghost self in the garden, and then when he found his ghost self in the garden, his ghost self was sitting on the floor, like quivering in fear. And then he was just like, where's Keeg? He was like, yo, Larry. He was like, Ghost Larry, what's wrong? Where's Keeg at? And then he was like, Keeg doesn't live here anymore. And then he was just like, what happened? Then he found Keeg. Keeg was actually in the garden, in the greenhouse, just floating around. And then Larry was trying to talk to grown Keeg, because Keeg was like a full grown negative spirit at that point, but he seemed really upset, but we didn't know why. And then little baby Keeg, that's actually inside our Larry, he came out, he spoke to the older version of himself, and the older version of himself said something that spooked the bejesus out of him, because he flew inside Larry and then never came out. And then then even later on, when they got back to their time, Keeg would not talk to Larry. Like, he was very upset with Larry. And it's like that specifically, I have theories based on that, because that whole thing was really fishy. And then Jane goes and talks to Jane, Ghost talks to Ghost Jane. It's actually Dr. H talking to Ghost Dr. H, and she was just like, oh, you doomed us all because if you really wanted to save the girl, you would have just taken her out of here the moment you seized control from Jane. But no, she was like, you wanted to psychoanalyze these buffoons, and you got the girl killed, and then now she got to wrestle with that. Their whole thing was, they were like, just tell us what happened so we can stop the apocalypse from happening and so we can fix it. And then, that's when Cyborg was like, hell no. And then they find out, they even showed a scene, because see, this is the crazy thing. They showed a scene like right before the time machine showed up in the future. They actually showed a scene maybe like 10, 15 minutes before that where Cyborg was talking to the ghost versions of, like the 20-year-old ghost versions of them. And he said to them, he was like, listen, they're going to be here any minute. I need you guys to distract them and keep them occupied while I knock Vic out and steal the time machine because 40-year-old Vic, his whole thing was he was going to go back in time and try to save the world by himself because he didn't trust anybody else to do it. And then, like Dr. H even said, she was like, why don't we just give them the information so they can go back to their present and save the future? Then everybody started laughing because they were just like, nah, the motherfuckers is morons and they're going to screw it up. So then, and see, but that's telling to me because now, because we got that scene, because we got the scene of the fact that it was actually a plan that Victor and the ghost members of the Doom Patrol came up with, that means every single conversation that they had with themselves was complete bullshit. It was all an act. The whole thing about Larry, like, rocking back and forth, like being scared, like Rita, like, all of it was a lie. All of it was bullshit. And now it's got me thinking. And then even the whole thing when 40-year-old Victor, felt the rumbling from underneath or whatever. Because if you have to think about it like this. If 40-year-old Victor saw was there when the time machine came out of the ground for the first time, he wouldn't have really had that much time to go talk to the ghost to try to set everybody else up. And then what was he looking for to begin with? So like that whole thing was just like kind of like weird to me. And it's putting me in a position where I feel like the 40-year-old members of the Doom Patrol, they're the bad guys. And they're the ones that like they're setting themselves up like I said, it was just one episode, but I'm really thinking that the future versions of them were the villains because again, like that whole thing about them talking to themselves was just complete and utter bullshit. 40-year-old Victor ended up tying up, like our Victor, and he did try to steal the time machine. Madame Rouge figured that out because when she went downstairs, she saw blueprint plans of a time machine, and I didn't get to read all the papers, but I don't know if Victor was trying to build a time machine or if he was just or the plan was always to steal theirs. But anyway, so she found out that he was trying to steal it. The team came outside, they confronted him, and then he was just like, help us. He said, just tell us the information so we can fix everything. And he was like, no, because you guys will fuck it up like you always do. And then that's when the butts started coming, like the actual zombie butts started coming. And then everybody ran back into the time machine. Young Victor tried to stay and help old Victor, but Madame Rouge and Rita yanked him in. And then once they got him in the time machine, they went back to their present. But before they left, 40-year-old Victor wrote something on the time machine that he wanted our Victor to read when he got where he needed to go. And then unfortunately, that's when the zombie butts, ended up eating 40-year-old Victor, and now 40-year-old Victor is dead too. So they end up getting back to the present, and when they get back to the present, they now know that they have a zombie apocalypse that they have to stop. And then when Vic read the writing on the wall, literally, it said, Vic, you can't have it all. Victor was not happy about that. And when he was just like, yo, fuck that, you trying to say I can't have it all, he went on, and instead of trying to come up with a plan to stop the zombie apocalypse, instead of like doing what you got to do, coming together as a team to save the world, he went on Facebook and tried to holler at some of his old classmates. Victor's in denial. And I don't know where Victor's going to go with this because, like I said, he looked like he ain't trying to even think about the apocalypse. He looked like he's trying to get his life on. Cliff was just like, he was just like, I'm going to stop the zombie butt apocalypse thing because he knows his family dies. And then he said, he put a mitten on his hand and he was like, I'm not going to take this mitten off until we stop the apocalypse because the first thing that I'm going to touch besides this mitten is my grandson. And then they said Larry and Baby Key got into it because Baby Key don't even want to listen to Larry. And so then even that, because if future Larry was pretending to hide in fear, and then he was just like, oh, Keeg doesn't live here anymore. And he was like, that's making me think that Larry's actually the bully. And grown Keeg told baby Keeg, look out for Larry because 20 years from now, Larry becomes a tyrant and he abuses us and we can't escape him. And blah. I feel like the future Doom Patrol is the bad guys. Like, I'm saying that now. I'm just calling it. But and then after that, Rita knows she failed as a leader. And then Madame Rouge knocks on her door and she's just like, I think I'm going to stay. And then, that's when Rita was just like, oh no. She's like, this is the worst day ever. Because Madame Rouge's whole thing is the apocalypse happened the day that she left. Maybe if she stays, she can help save the world. and then it's like maybe she could also earn readers' trust and everything. So she's trying to get that whole thing together. That was how the episode pretty much ended. And in the last scene, Willoughby showed up at the at the Wizards Round Table, and then unfortunately, with the exception of the zombie butt apocalypse, there's also another villain that's coming. I forgot the name that they wrote, but I don't even like. It didn't even matter because when I read the name, I didn't even recognize who the name was. But there's another villain at play here besides the zombie butt apocalypse, and it has something to do with Willoughby. So he's going to approach the Doom Patrol at some point to try to figure that out. We'll see what happens in the next episode. And thank you for tuning in. So this was good. Like this was very good because it was shocking. It left it got me on edge. Like they gave us 2 episodes right out the gate. So episode 2 will be coming soon, but let me know what you thought about Doom Patrol episode 1 season 4. What do you think about it, where everybody is in their life at this particular point? Like I said, share your questions, comments, and or concerns, and we'll talk about it because I really want to know what happens now. So check me out on Twitter and Instagram, always on YouTube. I should have my Stargirl season finale review up on the channel, as well as the remaining episodes of Warrior Nun. And like I said, we got Doom Patrol going strong, and look out for episode 2. So thanks for tuning in, guys. So we's back, baby. The Doom is back. Until next time, for episode 2 of the Doom Patrol. Take care. Stay out of the future because you ain't gonna like what you see. And we're out this bitch.